Sometimes you marry someone thinking they're perfect for providing the life you want, but when it comes to actually creating life together, well, that's when things get complicated. I'm Melissa, I'm 33, and if you want to judge me for what I'm about to tell you, go ahead. But hear me out first. Anyway, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoy my videos, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. I married Dawson 3 years ago when I was 30. Look, I know what that sounds like, woman panicking about her biological clock, settling for whoever would have her. But that's not how it was. Dawson is an excellent provider. He treats me incredibly well, never raises his voice, always remembers anniversaries, brings me coffee in bed on weekends. On paper, he's everything a woman should want. The problem is what's not on paper. Dawson is short. Like, really short. 5'6" on a good day, and I'm 5'8" in flats. When I wear heels, which I love to do, I tower over him. It's embarrassing. And it's not just the height thing. His hairline started receding when he was in his 20s, and now at 33, he's got this sad comb-over situation happening that fools absolutely no one. His jawline is weak, his shoulders are narrow, and he's got this soft, doughy physique that screams, "I gave up on myself years ago." But here's the thing. I do love him. I love how safe and secure he makes me feel. I love our house, our lifestyle, the way he handles all the bills and never makes me worry about money. When we started dating, we both talked about wanting a family someday. It seemed natural, inevitable even. Two people in love, building a life together, having children. Except now that we're actually talking seriously about trying for a baby, I can't stop thinking about genetics, about what our children would look like, about what kind of life they'd have if they inherited Dawson's, let's call them challenges. I started researching genetics online, just casual browsing at first. But then I fell down this rabbit hole of articles about height, male pattern baldness, facial structure, all these things that impact how people are treated in the world. Studies showing that taller men earn more money, that attractive children get more attention from teachers, that physical appearance affects everything from job interviews to dating prospects. "What are you always reading about?" Dawson asked one evening, trying to peek over my shoulder at my laptop. "Just some articles," I said, snapping it shut. "Nothing important." He gave me this look, hurt, confused. "You've been really distant lately. Is everything okay?" The truth is, I'd been pulling away physically. Every time he tried to initiate intimacy, I found excuses. Headaches, exhaustion, work stress. How could I explain that every time I looked at him, I pictured our theoretical son inheriting his weak chin and receding hairline? How could I tell him that the thought of passing on his genetics made my skin crawl? "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But I wasn't fine. I was spiraling. I started spending hours on sperm donor websites, looking at profiles of tall, attractive men with full heads of hair and strong jawlines. Men who played college sports, who had advanced degrees, who came from families with no history of baldness or genetic disorders. The more research I did, the more convinced I became that this was the responsible thing to do. Why condemn our child to a lifetime of being overlooked, bullied, passed over for opportunities, when we had the technology to give them better genetics? I knew I had to bring it up eventually. The conversation we'd been dancing around for months about actually trying for a baby. But every time I looked at Dawson's hopeful face, his excitement about becoming a father, I felt sick. One night as we were getting ready for bed, he brought it up again. "I was thinking," he said, sitting on the edge of our bed, "maybe we should start trying soon. We're not getting any younger." I felt my chest tighten. "Yeah, about that." "What?" He turned to face me fully, and I could see the anticipation in his eyes. "I've been doing some research," I said carefully, "about genetics, about giving our child the best possible start in life." "Okay," his voice was cautious now. "I think we should consider using a sperm donor." The silence that followed was deafening. Dawson just stared at me, his mouth slightly open, like he was trying to process what I'd just said. "A sperm donor," he repeated slowly. "Look, I love you," I said quickly. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want you to be our child's father in every way that matters. But biologically, I'm not good enough." His voice was flat. "That's not what I said." That's exactly what you said. He stood up, running his hands through his thinning hair. You want someone else's sperm because mine isn't good enough. I felt myself getting defensive. This isn't about you not being good enough. This is about giving our child every advantage possible. You experienced bullying growing up because of your height, your appearance. Do you want that for our son? Our son? His voice cracked. You mean your son with some stranger's DNA? He'd still be your son. You'd raise him, love him, teach him everything. But he wouldn't be mine. Dawson's eyes were filling with tears, which just made him look weaker and more pathetic. When we talked about having a family, I thought you meant with me. We never specifically said biological children, I said, grasping for any logic that might make him understand. Lots of couples use donors. It's not that unusual. Not unusual? He was getting louder now. What's not unusual is a wife wanting to have her husband's children. Don't yell at me, I snapped. I'm trying to have a rational conversation about what's best for our future child. Rational? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. There's nothing rational about telling your husband his genetics aren't good enough to pass on. That's not... You're twisting my words. Am I? Because it sounds like you married me for my paycheck, but you don't actually want any part of me in your children. The accusation stung because it was partially true, but I wasn't about to admit that. How dare you? I love you. No, you love what I provide. There's a difference. You're being dramatic. I'm being dramatic. His voice broke completely now. My wife just told me she doesn't want my children, and I'm being dramatic? I could feel the conversation spiraling out of control. This wasn't how I'd planned for it to go. I'd thought he'd be upset initially, but then see the logic in my reasoning. Instead, he was falling apart, and his weakness was making me angry. At the end of the day, it's my body, I said, my voice getting sharper. It's my decision who I want to be the biological father. Your decision. He was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Your decision. Yes, my decision. I'm the one who has to carry the baby, give birth, deal with the physical consequences. So yes, I get to decide what genetics go into creating that baby. Even if it destroys your husband. You're being ridiculous. This doesn't change anything between us. You'd still be the father in every way that matters, except the one way that actually matters to me. We stared at each other across our bedroom, and I could see something shifting in his expression. The hurt was hardening into something else, something that looked almost like disgust. I need some air, he said finally. Where are you going? I don't know. Anywhere but here. He grabbed his keys and wallet from the dresser and headed for the door. Dawson, wait. But he was already gone, the front door slamming behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. I stood there in our bedroom, my heart pounding, trying to figure out what had just happened. I'd presented him with a perfectly reasonable solution to a genetic problem, and he'd completely overreacted. Sure, maybe my delivery could have been gentler, but the core message was sound. Why was he being so stubborn about this? I tried calling him an hour later, but it went straight to voicemail. Then again at midnight. Then at 2 a.m. Nothing. He didn't come home that night, or the next night. On the third day, his sister Sailor called me. What the hell did you do to my brother? She demanded without preamble. Nice to hear from you too, I said. Cut the crap, Melissa. Dawson showed up at our parents' house in tears. In tears. I've never seen him cry, not even when Dad had his heart attack. What did you do? I felt a flare of irritation. Of course, he'd gone running to his family, painting me as the villain. We had a disagreement about starting a family. A disagreement? He said you told him his genetics weren't good enough for your children. That's not exactly what I said. Then what exactly did you say? I found myself getting defensive again. I suggested we consider using a sperm donor to give our child the best possible genetic advantages. It's not an uncommon practice. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. You're serious, she said finally. Completely serious. Look, I love your brother. No, you don't. Excuse me? If you loved him, you wouldn't have said what you said. You wouldn't have looked at the man you married and decided his DNA wasn't good enough for your precious children. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You married my brother because he's stable and takes care of you. But you're too shallow to actually want children with him. You want his paycheck, but not his genes. The accusation hit too close to home. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? How long have you been pulling away from him, Melissa? How long have you been making excuses not to be intimate? Because he mentioned that too. My cheeks burned. I hadn't realized Dawson had noticed, or that he'd share something so private with his family. My relationship with your brother is none of your business. It became my business when you broke his heart. He's not coming home, by the way, not until you apologize. Apologize for what? For wanting what's best for our future child. For being a selfish, shallow witch who married a good man under false pretenses. She hung up before I could respond. Over the next few days, I got similar calls from his parents, his other sister, even his cousin Barry, all of them angry, all of them taking his side. Not one person seemed to understand my perspective. I tried reaching out to my own friends for support. My college roommate Ashley listened to the whole story before saying, "Mel, I love you, but that's pretty messed up." How is it messed up to want the best for your child? Because you're basically telling your husband he's not good enough to be the father of your children. How did you think he was going to react? I thought he'd be mature enough to see the logic. There's no logic here. This is pure emotion. You married him, but you don't want his children. That's devastating. But I do want his children, just not his biological children. Do you hear yourself right now? I was getting frustrated with everyone's inability to see reason. So I'm supposed to condemn my future son to being short and balding just to spare Dawson's feelings? Maybe you should have thought about that before you married him. The comment stung, but I pushed it aside. Ashley didn't understand. None of them understood. I decided to post about the situation in some online forums, looking for support from people who might have dealt with similar issues. Surely, there were other women out there who'd faced this decision. The responses were brutal. Person after person calling me selfish, shallow, cruel. Someone even suggested that Dawson should divorce me and find someone who actually loved him. Between us, that comment made my stomach drop. Not because I was worried about losing Dawson's love, but because I was worried about losing Dawson's financial support. Our house, our lifestyle, everything I'd grown accustomed to, it all depended on his income. A week after our fight, I was getting desperate. I tried calling him again, and this time he actually answered. "What do you want, Melissa?" His voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. It actually scared me a little. "I want you to come home so we can talk about this like adults." Adults? You mean like how you talk to me about wanting another man's sperm? Don't be crude. Crude? I'm being crude? You're the one who wants to get pregnant with a stranger's genetic material. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Look, maybe I could have approached the subject more delicately. More delicately? Melissa, there is no delicate way to tell your husband that you think his DNA is inferior. I never said inferior. Then what would you call it? I struggled for words that wouldn't make things worse. Less optimal. He laughed, but it was bitter. Less optimal, right? Dawson, please, just come home. We can work through this. Can we? Because I don't think we can. I don't think I can get past this. You're being unreasonable. I'm being unreasonable? You want to have children with another man, and I'm being unreasonable for having a problem with that? They wouldn't be children with another man. They'd be our children, just with better genetics. Better genetics, he repeated. Better than mine. Yes. I mean, that's not how I meant it. But it was how I meant it, and we both knew it. I think, he said slowly, we need to take a break. A break from what? From this marriage. I'm gonna stay with my parents for a while. I need time to think about whether I want to be married to someone who sees me the way you do. The way I see you? I see you as my husband. No, you see me as a paycheck with legs, and apparently not very good legs, since you don't want our children to inherit them. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, feeling panic start to set in. This was not how this was supposed to go. I'd presented a logical solution to a genetic problem, and instead of appreciating my foresight, everyone was acting like I'd committed some unforgivable sin. 2 weeks passed without word from Dawson. I kept expecting him to come to his senses, to realize that I was right about giving our children every advantage possible. Instead, I got a call from a lawyer. Mrs. Melissa Thompson? This is regarding the dissolution of marriage papers that will be served to you tomorrow. My blood turned to ice. Dissolution of marriage? Your husband is filing for divorce, ma'am. The papers will explain everything. Divorce. He was actually divorcing me over this. Over trying to give our future children the best possible genetics. When the papers arrived, I couldn't believe what I was reading. He was citing irreconcilable differences and fundamental incompatibility regarding family planning. He was asking for a clean split of assets, no alimony, no support. I called him immediately. You can't be serious about this. I'm completely serious. Over a disagreement about sperm donors, you're going to throw away 3 years of marriage? This isn't about sperm donors, Melissa. This is about you looking at me and deciding I'm not good enough to father your children. This is about you marrying me for financial security while being disgusted by the thought of creating life with me. I'm not disgusted. Aren't you? When's the last time you initiated intimacy? When's the last time you looked at me with desire instead of calculation? I couldn't answer because he was right. I couldn't remember the last time I genuinely wanted him physically. This is insane, I said instead. You're ruining our marriage over your ego. My ego? He told me my genetics weren't good enough for your children, and it's about my ego? Yes, you're being weak and emotional instead of thinking logically about what's best for our family. Our family? What family? You don't want a family with me, remember? You want a family with some tall, handsome stranger's DNA. I want a family with you, just not biologically. Then you don't want a family with me. The divorce was finalized 8 months later. I had to sell our house and move into a small apartment. I had to go back to work full-time at a job I hated. Everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for, gone because Dawson couldn't handle a simple conversation about genetics. But here's what really gets me. About a year after our divorce was final, I found out through mutual acquaintances that Dawson had started dating someone. And not just dating, they got engaged after only 6 months together. The woman, Ember, what kind of name is that, is everything I'm not. She's short, plain, works some dead-end administrative job. She's the kind of woman who would be grateful to have a man like Dawson, who wouldn't question his genetics or push him to be better. I heard through the grapevine that they were trying for a baby. Apparently, she was thrilled at the prospect of having his children. His short, balding, genetically inferior children. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd tried to give our theoretical children every advantage, and instead, I'd lost everything. Meanwhile, Dawson was getting his happy ending with some mousy little woman who was too simple to see the genetic problems she was signing up for. I tried dating after the divorce, but it was harder than I'd expected. Men my age wanted women who were younger, prettier, more flexible. The kind of woman who wouldn't question their genetics or make demands about sperm donors. 2 years after our divorce, I ran into Dawson at a restaurant. He was with Ember, and she was obviously pregnant, very pregnant. They looked happy in that nauseating way that new couples do, all hand-holding and intimate smiles. He saw me first, and I watched his expression change from surprise to something that looked almost like pity. "Melissa," he said politely, "how are you?" "I'm great," I lied. "Congratulations on the baby." "Thank you." Ember beamed at me with the kind of genuine warmth that made me want to slap her. "We're so excited." "I'm sure you are." I looked at Dawson. "Boy or girl?" "Boy," he said, and I could see the pride in his eyes. A boy. A short, balding boy who would struggle with the same genetic disadvantages his father had. And they were thrilled about it. "Well," I said, forcing a smile, "I hope he's healthy." "He will be," Ember said with absolute certainty. "He'll be perfect because he's ours." Ours. The word I'd never been able to say about Dawson's theoretical children. I excused myself and left the restaurant, but I couldn't stop thinking about that encounter. About the way Dawson had looked at his pregnant fiancée, about the way she'd talked about their son being perfect simply because he was theirs. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe genetics weren't everything. Maybe love was more important than height or hairlines or jaw structure. But it was too late now. Dawson had moved on, found someone who appreciated him exactly as he was, someone who wanted his children, his genetics, his DNA. And I was alone, still single, still childless, Still convinced that I'd been right about the genetics thing, even as the evidence of my mistake grew more obvious every day. Look, I'm not saying I handled the whole situation perfectly. Maybe I could have been more tactful about bringing up the sperm donor idea. Maybe I should have considered his feelings more carefully. But I still think I was right about the genetics. I still think our children would have been better off with superior DNA. I still think Dawson was being emotional and irrational when he divorced me over it. The difference is, now I know that being right doesn't always matter. Sometimes people choose love over logic, emotion over reason. Sometimes they'd rather have imperfect children with the person they love than perfect children with superior genetics. I understand that now. I just wish I'd understood it when it could have made a difference.